How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co host from the West Coast, my co host who is back in the United States after an awesome trip out to Dublin, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing today?
Doing well, Jack. Just a lot of great things to report from that Steelers win in Dublin. Happy to be talking with you. Sad that we couldn't be talking last week just because of travel complications and stuff with me, but so fired up to be back with you. Lots of fun stuff going on. My Steelers were on their bye this last week, so I was able to have a Sunday spent without the stress of having to watch a Steelers team that no matter how big of a lead they have, they're always going to make my blood pressure rise when it's the fourth quarter when Carson Wentz is the opposing quarterback. They're still going to stress the heck out of me for no good reason. But this Sunday, at least, I had a little bit of rest and got to spend it a good sort of way. Back in California, back on my natural time zone, I would say, still trying to get the body clock back up to the right spot. But super fired up to be chatting with you, Jack. Super awesome that we're able to catch up after a little while. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, doing good. Excited, yeah, that we're able to get back at it, and yeah, and talk football, man. It's been a couple of weeks. We are a quarter of the way, a little bit past a quarter of the way through the NFL season. We are nearing halfway through the college football season, and so I mean we are fully in it at this point. And so yeah, so we're gonna take some time here to talk through college for the first time all season, which is just crazy how that's worked out, and also look at the landscape of the NFL right now. And so I think first we're going to talk about college football, and I think let's not bury the lead on this. Um, there are some teams that we thought were going to be really, really good that are not really good, and it's very surprising. If you listen to the first draft podcast um, with Mel Kiper Jr. and Field Yates, one of the things that both of them agreed with going into this year was that they thought that the three best teams in college football were Texas, Penn State, and Clemson, and that two of the three of them were going to be in the national championship, and one of them was going to win it all. And now here we sit, the second week of October, and all three of them are unranked, and all three of them have multiple losses. It's something. Nick, what sort of at a macro level, what are you thinking? What are you feeling about college football and just sort of how wild of a year this has been?
Mm-hmm. I would say that what stood out to me is that obviously it's been lauded as a very, very deep quarterback draft potentially coming up the next year, the next 2 years. There are a lot of quarterbacks running around college football who are very talented players. Dante Moore at Oregon, Arch Manning at Texas was obviously very highly lauded. Klubnik at Clemson, as you spoke about. Lots of quarterbacks out there. I think some more quarterbacks have unearthed themselves, like Matera at Oklahoma, as being high end players. And I think the depth at the quarterback position is potentially as deep as it's ever been. But it's also kind of been showing itself that the development of these quarterbacks has not been all there. Arch Manning at Texas being a great example, Aller at Penn State. Aller's development has been very disappointing considering how deep into his college career he is. He's still struggling with a lot of the same issues he has been in the past. And Arch Manning, particularly at Texas, who had all the hype in the world coming into the Ohio State game week one, and just looks completely underbaked. Like he just doesn't look close to a finished product. And the last couple of weeks, it just doesn't feel like he's been able to get on the page of the rest of the offense and really be able to be making good decisions and getting the ball where it needs to be. He seems like he might be 1 or even 2 years away from becoming what we think he could be. And
Yeah.
it's just really disappointing with the volume of quarterbacks, with the high end talent that's all over the place, the actual results and products that we're seeing on the field. So that's pretty disappointing. Still a big story, though, in my mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's also really interesting how looking at how much parity there is in college football in general. And some people love it, some people hate it. Everyone says that it's because of the transfer portal and NIL, which that's a big contributing factor to it. But also, I think we just see that there are a lot of teams that are really well coached, and we're seeing teams that have always had talent that maybe aren't necessary do not necessarily have the coaching right now, and teams that have been talent bare, but have really good coaching right now, and sort of bringing things to sort of level stuff out. Um, and I think we're seeing that in teams as a whole, but also in players and individuals. Like you talked about the progression of Drew Aller, and I don't think that it's a coincidence that we're seeing stunted progression with Drew Aller, and we've seen stunted Penn State success under James Franklin at the same time, and that they can only get so far. And so I think there's definitely some correlation there. Um, I just think it's really interesting when you look at the top, not even the top 25. Let's look at the top 10 right now in college football. Ohio State currently is ranked number 1, makes sense, stalwart, always there. Oregon ranked number 3, makes sense, stalwart, always there. Alabama 8 and Georgia 10 are the other two that are like, make sense, perennial top 10 teams. If you look at the rest, you have Miami, who has made a resurgence in the last couple of years. And I honestly think looks like the number 1 team in the country, not Ohio State. That's me personally. You also have Ole Miss at number 4, Texas A&M at 5, Oklahoma at 6, Indiana at 7, and Texas Tech at 9. And I think that's really cool. I enjoy it. I enjoy it more than seeing your top 10 always being some order: Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Clemson, Penn State, um, like Texas, right? And of course some of these other teams would be sprinkled in there that I've already mentioned. But I think that's really cool. I think it's interesting. I think it's fun. As much as I hate the expansion of conferences, and I really do, I hate it. I really hate guys like Lincoln Riley, the head coach of USC, complaining about the strain it is on his players having to travel and play games at such different times from week to week. I really hate hearing him do that, because it was the coaches and the athletic directors that decided that it was important to do this to the conferences. But I also love that we're getting to see a top 10 showdown each and every week, it feels like, between teams. Like this week, we're going to get to see Oregon play Iowa. We're going to get to see Ohio State play a ranked Illinois, which they were already in the Big Ten together, right? But some of these matchups I just think are really, really fun.
Yeah, definitely having quality football games on the docket every week is a huge win for college football. The ability to have way more cross conference and just quality games on the weekly, when it felt like, man, if you got Alabama, Texas, or Oregon, Ohio State in the past, that felt like a luxury, like a once in a blue moon every couple of years type thing. We're able to
Hmm.
get that so much more frequently. And we get awesome games. Like we had Penn State, Oregon 2 weeks ago, and that was a great game, went to overtime, really tight game. And those games used to feel so far out, and you used to have far more blowouts, so few games that actually mattered. Now we have teams that are really high up in the polls that are losing games. Teams like Texas or Penn State, who always, as you said, perennially are very high up in the rankings, and they're falling down because they're losing, but they're losing because they're playing quality opponents and playing good games.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we should be punishing teams as heavily for having really entertaining games on television. And the expanded playoff has done that, making it to where you can have more than one loss and still be able to make the playoffs. And I'm all for more quality football in that manner.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think something that, and there are a lot of complaints about this with college basketball, but college basketball has the net rankings and the quad system. And basically every single team in Division 1 basketball is ranked 1 through 300, whatever. And if you play a team from 1 to 50 at home, it's considered a quad 1 game. If you play a team 1 to 100 on the road, it's considered a quad 1 game. And then, and you sort of work your way down. They have that. And the issue is that it goes too much into deciding which teams get into into March Madness, into the NCAA tournament, and that's where I think the problem is. But it does reward teams for playing good teams because it's like, oh wow, you have this many quad one wins. That's going to hold way more weight than this team that maybe has a better record but only has three quad one wins. And
Mhm.
so there's pros and cons to it, but I think it would be interesting to see what that would look like in college football. Um, so we can see that. Like right now, Notre Dame is a two-loss team, and their two losses came to Texas A&M and Miami. Two very good losses. But you know what? They are not going to play another team that is probably going to sniff the top 25 for the rest of this year, and they'll probably get in as a 10-2 team into the college football playoff. When you look at it and you're like, who did you beat that's worthwhile? Who did you beat that stands out? You know? Like so I do think that we should try to transition into that, or at least see what it might look like to do that, and how that would impact rankings, college football playoff selection, stuff like that. um yeah, you have anything else to add about college football?
Um, hmm, I'm just all for more of the big games, and I don't know that in college football, to be honest, that we've seen the highest gear of any of the teams in the top 10. Like there are a bunch of good teams in the top 10, but even Ohio State, who's coming off of a national championship, who had a veteran laden team last year, they look like a really good team this year and they have a great defense. But I think the ability to have a second gear is something they have in their back pocket that we haven't gotten to see yet. I think
Yeah.
Oregon last year, they were really impressive. They're really impressive again this year. I wonder if they have another gear that we haven't seen yet, being able to get more really into a groove and be able to get that offense humming. I'm just curious what the next gear for these teams is that we have in the top 10 here. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, if we have any team that's going to be approaching just a really strong favorite status going into the playoffs outside of maybe an Oregon or an Ohio State or a Miami,
Yeah.
or
I'll
including those
I
guys if you, one of them.
Yeah, I think it's important to also just, you're talking about Ohio State, who's number one in the country, Oregon, who's number three. Miami, who's number two, has three ranked wins already. They have a win over Notre Dame, they have a win over South Florida, and they have a win over Florida State. And all three of those teams are still ranked right now. It's not like they were ranked then and now they've, fallen off. Um, so so I don't know. I'm a believer in this Miami team, which is hard to even fathom because I thought of all of the top 10 teams going into this year. Something really interesting. For like the last 30 years, every single year but one year, there has been a team that has been a preseason top 10 team that has ended the year outside the top 25. All but
Mm-hmm.
one, and that one was a 7-5 Texas team that beat Georgia in the Cotton Bowl, and so they went 8-5 and beat Georgia, who was ranked like number six, and so they snuck in at 25. That is the only exception. And so I thought Miami was bound to be that team this year. I didn't believe in Carson Beck,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to give them their flowers for what's been a really, really stellar year so far. And if you just kind of look at the rest of their schedule, they kind of get to cruise in. I mean, they're going to play some pesky teams, like there always are in the ACC. But yeah, anyway, good stuff. All right, transitioning to the NFL. Like I said, we are a little past a quarter of the way through, not quite a third of the way through the season. Most teams have played 5 games, though week five is the beginning of us starting to see some buys, and so not everybody has. And so we just kind of wanted to do like sort of a check-in, see how things are, see how people feel about, or see how we feel about some of these teams. And so Nick, I'll turn it to you first, to hear what you're thinking, because I've got a bold take about the NFL at this point that I think would be fun to discuss. So the floor is yours, and yeah, what are your thoughts here, about the state of the NFL here 5 weeks into the year?
Mm-hmm. I would just go out and take a look at all of the teams that we thought were going to be great going into this year and look at the teams that we thought were going to be terrible. And there are some things in the NFL right now that are just upside down. The Texans seemed like they were a lock to be the team out of the AFC South to be able to win that division. They start out 0-3. They're 2-3 now, so somewhat bouncing back. But their offensive line had been so dreadful where going 0-3 just wasn't a surprise. Their offense had been terrible through the first couple of weeks until they played Baltimore in this fifth week here, and they just destroyed them. But the Texans, I think, people didn't think would be this bad, and they are looking awful, and CJ Stroud's had issues. That leads me, though, into the Ravens. They've looked like a disaster recently. I just think that the Ravens have shown up as being a team the last couple of years with Lamar Jackson, with whatever he has around him, as being a team that's going to produce amazing offense, so efficient, great at getting into the red zone, great at converting third downs, just almost unstoppable to try and figure out a way to break them down. The Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson run game combination, almost unstoppable. And this year, the offense has been really good with Lamar Jackson in there, but Derrick Henry taking a step back. Lamar Jackson still a superhero, but the defense has been terrible. The O-line's been terrible. The Chiefs, we thought the Chiefs just coming off of 3 straight Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl wins in that time, and they've struggled through the first 5 weeks in the season, losing to Jacksonville this week. The Bengals with Joe Burrow carrying them, and with him being out now, he's no longer able to carry them. And the AFC especially too, Daniel Jones and the Colts coming onto the scene, and Daniel Jones looking not only like a competent quarterback, but like a really good quarterback, almost doing an impression like Sam Darnold last year. I just think the AFC has kind of been turned on its head this year with there being no follow through from the last couple of years outside of basically Buffalo as being the only really good team that's looked really good this year. And so that would just be what I would kind of point out, that a bunch of the teams we thought would be really good aren't, and a bunch of the teams we thought would be bad aren't. Jacksonville as well. Jacksonville has been a dumpster fire the last couple of years, and they've looked good this year. They just got a signature win. A lot of upside down stuff in the AFC, though, this year.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's really interesting, thinking about Jacksonville and then thinking back to the draft night trade between them and the Browns, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people thinking the Browns are literally going to have picks 1 and 2 in next year's draft. Like that was the sentiment, and
Yep.
now it's looking like Cleveland very well might have pick 1. They're going to be fighting New Orleans for it, but that other pick might be, in the late 20s. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. That said, here's my hot take that I think I want to hear your thoughts on. I want to discuss a little bit. My hot take is that 5 weeks into the NFL year, the 2025 season, there is not a great team in the NFL. Period. I think there are good teams, but I do not see a great team. When you look at all of the teams that have played 4 or 5 games and have only not won one of them, the Dallas Green Bay tie takes both of those teams out of this conversation. If you look at all of the teams that have played and have only not won one of their games, I do not see a team that sticks out to me. I don't. You look at the wins, and we can go through them right now. So starting with Buffalo, their wins are Baltimore, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Saints. Well, the Jets, Dolphins, and Saints wins do not mean much. The Baltimore win is starting to mean less and less, even before the Lamar Jackson injury. Okay, Pittsburgh, their wins are the Jets, New England, and Minnesota. Okay, the Minnesota win carries a little bit of merit, but Jets, New England, I don't know.
New England looked
Especially,
good. They just beat the Bills.
yeah, New England also turned the ball over 5 times, and Pittsburgh only scored 21 points. So,
True. True.
you know, and don't worry, we'll get to Detroit, and I'll tell you my gripes with them too. Right?
Yeah.
Indianapolis, 4-1. You were just talking about them.
Mhm.
Their wins are Miami, Denver, Tennessee, and Las Vegas. The Denver one is the only one that carries a little bit of weight, if you ask me. I
Mhm.
think if they had beaten the Rams instead of Denver, maybe, I think I'd actually feel a little bit better about them because I trust the Rams a little
Mhm.
bit more right now. But
Those are both
still,
fraudulent kind of games, though, as far as the end of game, because the leverage call against the Broncos that kind of threw that game off. The Broncos should have won that game. And the AD Mitchell fumble through the end zone when he absolutely burnt the coverage on him. Both of those games could have been flipped really easily as far as deserving to win, if you want to talk about that.
exactly, exactly. Jacksonville, 4-1. Their wins Carolina, Houston, San Francisco, and Kansas City. Their loss to Cincinnati pre the Joe Burrow injury. The San
Mhm.
Francisco win is a legit good win.
Mhm.
However, that was also without Brock Purdy and the first time we were seeing the first time we were seeing Mac Jones in that role, and
Mhm.
so there was going to be kinks to iron out.
Mhm.
This because we're about to talk about or I'm about to mention a few teams' resumes that have wins over Kansas City. I don't necessarily think that this year so far we can call a win over Kansas City a good win. I
Mhm.
think I think it's a non-needle mover. I think it's a game that if you lose, it's like, ooh, that's kind of a bad loss. But if you win, you can't go, oh, that's a good win. I think it just kind of stays in the middle, right? It's hard to beat them, don't get me wrong. But especially with Jacksonville beating them at home and not if it was at Arrowhead, I'd put it in more highly regarded. But because it's
Mhm.
not, I don't know, right? Philadelphia's
Mhm.
in the same boat. They have a win against Kansas City in Arrowhead. Okay, that's okay. Their other wins though, Dallas, Tampa Bay, and the Rams. I think Philadelphia probably has the best resume so far of all of these
Mhm.
one-loss teams because their loss is also to Denver, but also we just watched them lose to Denver and we watched the way they lost, and because of that, it makes us very nervous about them, right? Because we've seen this Philadelphia team have hot starts and cool off so fast under Nick Sirianni, right? And
Mhm.
so, especially the way they lost to Denver, it looked very similar to what Baltimore seems to do in the playoffs every year, where they just forget that they have one of the best running backs and run games in football, and they stop using it. Detroit, my team, 4-1. Their wins: Chicago, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati. Now, those wins, they've scored more than 30 points in all four of those wins. The concern after week one about like the offense, I don't know, right? Not a concern anymore. Seems very clear that was just a one
Mhm.
week, we got to adjust some things and get used to each other between the offense and the new coordinator. That
Mhm.
said, though, none of those wins are wins that make you go like, "Oh, this is a really, really great football team." Tampa Bay is 4-1. Their one loss to Philadelphia, which is a game that they nearly came back and won. That said, their wins all come from behind wins and game-winning drives against Atlanta, Houston, the Jets, and the Seahawks.
Mhm.
None of the rest of those teams are on this list. And then you have
Mhm.
San Francisco with wins against Seattle, New Orleans, Arizona, and the Rams, and a loss to Jacksonville. Shout out San
Mhm.
Francisco for having 3 wins in the division already, but it's not meaning much, right? So when you look at all of that
Especially
and
how
you put
injured they are. Yeah.
right, you put all of that together, and I'm like, there are teams that have great records, but
Mhm.
don't look like great teams. They look like good teams that have potential to put it together. And it takes one of those teams getting a win against a really, really good other team to like be like, okay, and they weren't just beating up on the bad teams, right? But I think about Detroit last year, who everyone was like, oh, well, their record got aided by playing against the AFC South or whatever. And I'm like, that's true, but they also put up 50 against both Jacksonville uh and Tennessee, right? So
Mhm.
when you do that and you hold them to under 17 points, then that's like no, but you didn't just win against a good team, you destroyed, or a bad team, you destroyed against a bad team. You put them in their place. You showed we're up here and you're way down here. None of these teams I
Mhm.
feel like have done that enough against, the inferior opponents. And then also that Detroit team also had wins against good teams, and none of these
Mhm.
teams have done enough of both of that so far for me to feel like,
Mhm.
oh, this is one of the juggernauts. This is the team that is
Mhm.
above the pack
Mhm.
and everyone else is trying to file in behind them.
Mhm. I get you. I actually agree with the last sentiment that you were getting at in terms of like beating and dominating bad teams versus just winning against good teams or dominating good teams. Where I think a hallmark of what makes for a great team is the ability to win multiple ways. Can you win with your defense dominating? Can you win a low scoring bludgeoning game? Can you win a shootout high scoring game? Can you win a game with weird lots of turnovers? Can you win a game with no turnovers? Can you win a game when fourth down calls don't go your way? Can you win a game where the flags and the penalties get really weird and sway things? Can you win games multiple ways? And I don't think we've seen a team that's able to really say, oh, yeah, I'm able to win with a really high scoring shootout and all really good. And my passing game can take over. And my defense can just shut down the opponent at times. And my head coach is really good and can manage these games. I just think a team that covers all these boxes hasn't shown itself yet,
Right.
which doesn't mean that it won't. But as
Right.
of now, like last year, the Eagles were a dominant team that in all phases, their defense was incredible. Their run game was incredible. Their offensive line, their defensive line, their coordinating was at a really high level last year. Their ability to pass the ball when needed was really impressive because they have great receiving threats. Their quarterback's really good in the playoffs and in clutch time in those moments. And this year, I think the hole that their pass game has shown at times is way too big of a hole to make you feel confident that they can be last year's team this moment. It doesn't mean that
Sure.
they can't do it, but it means they're
Right.
not doing it right now and are starting to show a pattern of not being able to do it because it's been 5 weeks.
Yeah. And, the first 5 games is the time to figure things out and get things adjusted and learn your roster a little bit better and make the adjustments that you need to make with stuff. But also, we've seen a lot of teams that they're doing that in the first 5 weeks and they're still showing how great they are. And then it's like, this is how great they are when it's like, oh yeah, they still haven't figured out what they're doing. They still haven't figured out how to run the ball effectively. Now imagine what they'll look like once they do. And we just haven't seen any of that yet. Um, like when I think about, I mean, the Lions are the first team that come to mind because they're the team that I know the best. Like, yeah, they're putting up boatloads of points, since week 2. I still have concerns about that defense. I really do. I have serious concerns about the secondary, especially with DJ Reed being hurt, So like,
And Arnold's potentially out for the year. Not that he was
well,
playing
second
anyway. We don't
opinion,
know
second
very much.
opinion said it's not going to be that bad, and also if Terrion Arnold does not suit up, I don't know if that might be a boost for us, instead of instead of, but regardless, so there's, again, we're only through 5 weeks, right? And that's the conversation that we're having right now.
Mhm.
When we get through, if we get through, 8, 9 weeks and we're still saying the same thing about these teams, okay, well, that'll be a little different. And part of that also does just kind of come to scheduling. Like when I'm looking at this next week's schedule, um, there is only two games, only 2 games between two teams that have over 500 records. that is
Wow.
that is Jacksonville hosting Seattle on Sunday
Mhm.
afternoon at 1, and the other
Mhm.
is uh, Tampa Bay hosting San Francisco Sunday afternoon at 4:25.
Mhm.
Other than that, you
You
have
get
the
Lions
Bills.
Chiefs though. You get Lions Chiefs and Chiefs, although they're under 500, like they're not a bad team.
Right? No, they're not. And I'm not saying that the Chiefs are a bad team, but I'm just saying, like, okay, they're a middle of the pack team right now. That's what their record shows, and that's what we've seen play out on the field, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's Kansas City, it's Patrick Mahomes. They're gonna figure it out. The question is, how good do they look once they've figured it out? Because they look the way they have over the last 8 years. It feels like once they figure it out, or there's they figure it out, but they look more like the Philadelphia Eagles team that you know won their first 11 games or whatever and then lost their next 7, so it just kind of depends there. But looking at these other one loss teams, and what, like, okay, who do they play this week, what can they prove? I only see, outside of, like I said, Jacksonville, and outside of Tampa Bay and San Francisco, I only see teams that are playing games that if they if they win, it's like, okay, doesn't really move the needle. If they lose, it's like, yikes. You have the Eagles playing the Giants tomorrow night, Thursday night. You've got um, the Steelers hosting the Browns Sunday afternoon. You've got the Colts hosting the Cardinals Sunday afternoon. You've got the Bills going to Atlanta on Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't view any
I
of those
still
games that I
contend
just
that
mentioned, if the team that's supposed to win, if they win, being like, oh, okay, you know what? They're making their push to be a clear front runner in the league.
right. I get you. I still think though with the Chiefs Lions game, if you're saying that the Lions are the team that's supposed to win, sure, go for it. The Lions are the team with the better record who's been playing better lately. Great. If the Lions beat the Chiefs, the Lions should be ecstatic because they haven't been getting wins against good teams lately. And if the Chiefs beat the Lions, the Chiefs should be really happy about it. That's a
Yeah.
game I think that sways our opinion of these teams. Where if the Lions beat the Chiefs now I'm like, okay, now they're not just crushing teams' throats who are bad teams with bad defenses. Now the Lions are showing they can get back to when they beat the Chiefs in week 1 a couple of years ago, and it was really impressive. They were able to pick off Patrick Mahomes, get a pick 6 off of that. They were able to play against a good quarterback and not get dissected. That'll be impressive to me. And if the Chiefs can beat a team and lock down a team whose offense is just full of studs and the offensive line's really improved back to the level potentially that it was at last year, and their play calling's still been really good and their offense has been scoring at a high clip, that's going to be impressive either way. I think that is a swing game that can move either of these teams to a level I think that they haven't been at this year, at least, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you saying that sort of like that makes me want to talk a little bit more, like, just about the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay. And so I think there's, and we see this especially in football, I feel like, because there's, such a smaller sample size of games compared to every other sport, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like you sort of hit this paradox of, it this team is really good but they've had a difficult schedule, or is this team losing in this difficult schedule because they're not actually that good? and
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to figure out what that is, and we're sort of at this crossroads with the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's say they lose this week to the Lions. If that's the
Mm-hmm.
case, the Chiefs, through 6 games, through a third of the year, are 2-4. Their wins would be against the Giants and hosting the Ravens, who we've already talked about. The Ravens are not the same Ravens. And then their
Mm-hmm.
losses are to the Chargers, to the Eagles, to the Jaguars, and to the Lions. Does that
Mm-hmm.
say, no, the Chiefs are a good team, they've just had a difficult schedule, when before we've looked at the Chiefs and they've had difficult schedules and they've gone 4-2 through that stretch, if at worst, instead of 2-4 through that stretch? Or is it saying, yes, the Chiefs are playing a difficult schedule, but also they're not very good because they didn't win any of those games outside of the ones that were sort of the easy games. What
Mm-hmm.
let's go through the scenario. The Lions
Mm-hmm.
go into Arrowhead this Sunday night. They
Mm-hmm.
beat them. It's not like, oh man, that was, a really close whatever. There was a weird call or anything like that. It's just like, Lions go in, they handle business. Maybe it's one of those they're up by 10 points with 6 minutes to go, and the Chiefs score a touchdown. To make it look closer than it is. A situation like that. Do we go on Monday morning after and go, no, the Chiefs are a good team. They've just played a difficult schedule, or do we go,
Mm,
the Chiefs have played a difficult schedule, but in the past that hasn't mattered and they've won those games and they aren't this year, and maybe that means that the Chiefs just really are not as good.
mm. I would contend that it's it depends on how the offense and the defense play in terms of eye test. Because, say, for example, at the end of that game last week, the Chiefs weren't doing the little things right. There's a clip of Chris Jones on that play. I don't know if you watched it, where Trevor
Yep.
Lawrence trips around, falls down, gets back up, runs, and scores the touchdown.
Yeah, and
And Chris
Chris
Jones
Jones
is
is just
just
standing there.
standing there, just watching, just looking at the play happen. And that, I think, is something that you would never see with this Chiefs team. The last several years, you never see a dude who's a captain, a probable Hall of Famer, a dude who's intense, strong, the heart of that defense doing that. That was just the screws being loose and not being tight and on assignment and playing with discipline. And I think Mahomes throwing the interception, the 99-yard pick six, like that is just a play that you don't see Mahomes throw a red zone interception like that. That was a red zone at the goal line interception that swayed the game 10 to 14 points like that. And that's one of those critical plays where even if your pass game's not great or your run game's not great or both of them are doing fine, those little momentary plays are critical. And the Chiefs are amazing at the critical moments. Normally, you have Steve Spagnuolo on the defense calling an amazing blitz plan and being able to bring pressure from all directions, even when the personnel isn't amazing on the defense. He's still able to
Hmm.
manufacture that pressure. If they aren't able to manufacture pressure on Goff to be able to speed up his internal clock, to be able to make him uncomfortable, I'm going to start getting worried about the Chiefs defense. If Mahomes isn't tight and the offense isn't on the screws and you see an interception or a weird fumble or weird game management, I'm going to be really concerned about the Chiefs if that's what happens. Just because the Chiefs last year they went 11-0 in one score games. They literally didn't lose a one score game last year whatsoever because when it comes to that clutch time, they were so good about being on the screws about it. In the Super
Hmm.
Bowl the year before, they were able to get the pressure on Purdy to force him to throw it away so that he had to kick a field goal and not score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. They did
Hmm.
that because they were really good at those moments, being able to be clutch and smart and play make. This Chiefs team hasn't been able to necessarily do that. Where in the Giants game, the Chiefs playmaking was Mahomes throwing the ball backwards to Pacheco and then the fumble being scooped up and then Mahomes forcing a fumble on the defensive player and stripping it. That playmaking isn't positive playmaking. That's covering for poor execution and poor offense. This
Yeah.
Chiefs hasn't been great about the productive, in the rhythm sort of playmaking that's a hallmark of them. If they aren't
Right.
able to do that, that's going to be really, really concerning. If they just are on the screws and lose, that's one thing. But if, again, coming off of a loss, coming off of a prime time game, lose to the Lions, that's going to be a really big concern that I think is going to start showing they might not have the talent or the horses to be able to get it done.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, so the Chiefs right now they're sitting at 2-3, and we've seen their body of work, we look at these first 5 games and what the team looks like in these first 5 games. Here are the Chiefs' next 5 games. They host the Lions, then they host the Raiders, then they host the Commanders, then they travel to Buffalo, then they have a bye, and then they travel to Denver. The Kansas City Chiefs that we have seen the first 5 weeks of the year, I think go 1-4 in that stretch. Maybe 2-3. Maybe they're able to sneak one out. One
Off
of
the
those
bye
games,
against Denver, maybe. I think off the bye,
maybe
anyway,
or
off the bye.
or
And the
or maybe
Raiders game,
Washington at
if they
home.
lose the Raiders game, It's
Well, that
not
won't
good.
happen. There's no way that happens. I, I just feel like there's no way that happens.
Right. But if it
But,
did,
right,
yeah.
yeah, no, it's true. So let's say they go through this next 5 game stretch and they go 2-3. Okay, then it's
Mhm.
like, no, like it's not like, oh well, the Chiefs, they've had a really difficult schedule. It's like, that doesn't matter. This is not a great football team. Like, what separates the great teams from the good teams? They're able to win the hard games. The Chiefs haven't done that yet this year. They're about to have 4 more opportunities in their next 5 games. You know,
Mhm.
we'll see. But like, it's just, I think part of the reason that it's so shocking is over the last, you know, basically since Patrick Mahomes has been the full-time starting quarterback for the Chiefs, we've never looked at their record and had to say, "Oh, well, they've played a difficult schedule." Like, that hasn't mattered. They've been the top of the pyramid. They've been the no, this is the test for all of the teams that play them. How good are you? How close do you play them, right? If you beat them, like, wow, you're the anomaly, like, you know, Buffalo beats them in the regular season, and then but they're still 9-1 in their first 10 games or whatever. If we're having to defend the Chiefs with, oh well, they've played a difficult schedule, I think that says enough about the status of the Kansas City Chiefs.
I have a question here with regards to this. What record through the next 5 games do the Chiefs have to quell your fears about, oh, maybe they're just a bad team? If they go 3-2, are you just like, okay, they're at 500 now. They beat at least one or two good teams here. I feel good. Do they have to do better than that? Could they go 2-3 and you still are like, damn, they're 2 games below 500, but like they beat a good team here. They're good. Like, where's the line for you?
I think, let me put it this way. I think if they win their next 5 games, win all of them, then I'm like, okay, they've answered all my questions and they're a Super Bowl contender. Okay, so
Okay.
let's start with that. I
Yeah.
think if they win 4 games, they've answered most of my questions, and I believe they're definitely going to get into the playoffs. But I still, unless Buffalo kind of implodes, will still be like Buffalo's the favorite in the AFC.
Okay.
If they go 3-2 and they're 500, I'm going to be like, they're going to be a wild card team that someone unfortunately is going to have to play play in the first round of the playoffs. But then
Okay.
that's as far as they'll make it. If they go 2-3, then I'm going to be like, no, this is not a good team. And
Okay.
if they go 1-4, then I will say this is a bad team, right?
Okay.
So I'm not saying yet that Kansas City is a bad team. The sample size is too small and the games are too close, right? This is not New Orleans or Las Vegas, in the way that they've lost, as well as the record. But that said, okay, you have another 2-3 stretch. Well, one, it's because then the 5 games after that, uh, hosting Indianapolis, going to Dallas, hosting the Texans, hosting the Chargers, going to Tennessee. There's a chance they
Mhm.
go 2-3 in that stretch too, right? So like, maybe 3-2, 4-1, but like, if we're in the reality of they went 2-3 in their first 5 games, they went 2-3 in their next 5 games,
Mhm.
that's looking like a 2-3 at best. And then those
Mhm.
next 5 games,
Mhm.
it's which I do not think will happen. I think the Chiefs will absolutely end the season with a winning record. Like, if I
Mhm.
had to put money on it right now, at worst they finish 9-8, probably 10-7, and they're in the playoffs. That's what I think will happen because I trust Andy
Mhm.
Reid and I trust Steve Spagnuolo to put it all together.
Mhm.
But if we're talking next week and they made the same mistakes that they made against Jacksonville, or the same mistakes that they made against Philadelphia or against the Chargers, and because of that, they're playing against a Lions team that I think right now I think is better than those teams that they lost to, that they made these silly mistakes, and they end up losing by 2 touchdowns plus. Well, then we're gonna need to then there's gonna be more concern, and I think we're gonna need to turn up the panic meter a little bit more.
Mhm. I get you there. The Chiefs definitely through the next 5 games, if they go 2-3 in the next five, they're pretty screwed there. Like the end of their season schedule isn't the hardest, but there are definitely a couple of losses that could stare them in the face there. I just think that Rashee Rice coming back should be able to give them an extra gear on this offense that
That's
should
true.
get this offense going from a solid to good offense to a good to great offense. Maybe not a
Yeah.
great offense straight out the gate, but Mahomes has been having to do everything, man. He's been leading their team in rushing and been the main one doing the playmaking. Like it's just been a struggle. Worthy was injured, Rashee Rice obviously out. But the O lines come together. The running backs can run out short yardage situations, but man, they're not explosive. Rashard Smith has kind of come on a little bit as a contributor, who I was high on. I love Rashard Smith, but man, Pacheco and Hunt. Pacheco post injury last year, man, has just not been the same, just no explosiveness. And
Yeah.
Hunt just every single time since the first time he was with Kansas City back in 2017-18, he has just not been able to be anywhere near the same player as he was back then. If they could trade for an explosive running back like an A chain if the Dolphins implode all the way, Brees Hall if the Jets decide to tear it all down, I think that one of those dudes could bring this Kansas City offense to be like tip top, like top five kind of offense if you get the receivers back healthy and the O line and an explosive running back. But like, if you don't have that, if this is just the set offense, Rashee Rice comes back and you have that, I don't think the offense is going to be quite explosive enough necessarily to be able to overcome what the team is right now.
Yeah, I think that my biggest concern with this Chiefs team is the offensive line. Like I know they addressed it a lot this offseason, but Jawan Taylor is still not good. Like and I'm looking at the edges that they're
Mm-hmm.
going to be facing here. Okay, so Aiden Hutchinson this next week, then Max Crosby.
Mm-hmm.
The when they play the Commanders, that'll be the worst. That'll be the worst by far edge situation
They're
that they face.
terrible. The Commanders'
But
defense is
still,
terrible.
Von Miller might still be able to take care of Jawan Taylor.
Maybe,
Um,
yeah.
then they'll play the Bills, Joey Bosa, not
Mm-hmm.
for only 50% of the snaps, but still Joey Bosa.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll play the Broncos, who have one of the best
Nick
defenses
Benito's
in
playing amazing. Yep.
right. Then they'll play the Colts, who again, we look at their wins: Miami, Denver, Tennessee, Las Vegas. But their defense has played above average so far this year.
Mm-hmm.
Then they'll play the Cowboys defense and they'll score 800 points.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll play the Houston's defense, which, despite C.J. Stroud's struggles over last year and a little bit this year, their defense has still always been spectacular. Then the Chargers, who, knock on wood, would have Khalil Mack back at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then again, we're in these last four games: Chargers, Titans, Broncos, Raiders, and it's like, okay, well, is it too late? So like the I don't. How do I put this? I think that there's a chance that the Chiefs run into the same thing that the Bengals did last year, and that they had
Mm-hmm.
enough games to win at the end to try and get in, but they needed help that they couldn't get. I think there
Mm-hmm.
is a world where we see that. I think again, most likely world, they're 10-7, they're a wild card team without question. But I think if they go 2-3 in these next 5 games, then they're going to be in that situation where, it's like, okay, yeah, in the past, those 7 games that they would have left, they should be all of those teams in those 7 games. But if they go 2-3 in this next
Mm-hmm.
5 game stretch, then they aren't the team of old, and so they'll probably lose 2 of those, and they won't have the
Mm-hmm.
firepower that they need to crawl all the way back.
Right. My thing with the Chiefs, though, is that they have two avenues, whereas last year or 2 years ago's Bengals only had one. That Bengals team was never going to win the division because the Ravens were running away with it. This Chiefs team has the avenue of being a wild card or winning the division because the Chargers have deteriorated with injuries. And the Broncos, Bo Nix has struggled to say the least. And we don't think probably that the Broncos are a crazy dominant team. And so
Yeah.
I think that hypothetically, the Chiefs could go 3-2 through the next five and still win the division. Like they could be 500 and still figure out a way. Like that Bengals team before, like there was no chance they were winning the division. They just had to outrun all the other teams in the whole AFC that were all trying to go for those wild card games.
Yeah.
This Chiefs team, they could be fighting against the Jags or the Steelers or the Ravens or whoever's trying to get the wild card. But they could just beat out the Chargers and Broncos with those late games because they have those late in season, in division games. And they could just beat them and then they can just lock up the division that sort of way. And that was never a path that the Bengals were able to have there. The last topic that I know we were wanting to get to that I was posing to you earlier on would happen to be a couple of disaster types of teams that we've seen this season. That would be the Ravens that we spoke about and the Bengals, who we brought up a little bit. Two teams, both AFC North teams, both teams that we think have a top four quarterback when healthy. Lamar Jackson has been incredible this year. Joe Burrow last year was insane, incredible, the best passer in the league last year. And this year, both of those teams, injuries, Burrow's not going to be back for several months. Lamar Jackson, when he was out for the Ravens this last week against the Texans, looked as bad as the Bengals without Burrow did. And the Bengals without Joe Burrow looked worse than the Saints. And the Saints look like the worst team in the league. And so I just want to pose to you, with these two teams, is it showing a lack of roster building and just that issue with these teams that their quarterbacks had so much on their shoulders that now that they're out, they're just disasters? Or is the league just moving in a direction where quarterbacks matter that much? Or are these quarterbacks just that good? Like, what's the reason that we're in this scenario where these superstar quarterbacks are out and the sky is falling? It's not even they're bad. It's they are lifeless. The Ravens without Lamar last week were lifeless. The Jake Browning Bengals looked like they couldn't run, pass, play defense, nothing. They couldn't do anything right. Why is that? What thoughts do you have on that? Go for it, Jack.
I mean, I think what it shows is, I think it just shows what we already knew, in that the quarterback position is the most important position in all sports, in all professional sports. You know, in baseball, like all nine guys go up to bat. You know, in basketball, you've got five guys on the floor that each have equal opportunity to score the basketball. And in hockey, they have line changes, right? So like even the star player is only on the ice for like between half and a third of the time, right? So I just think that that's part of it, but also I think what a major factor is, like, how good of a job can the coach do at keeping the locker room in situations like this? um, because it is a long season. There's still lots of games. Yes, you might have a couple games to then, iron things out with the backup quarterback, whoever's stepping in. The Bengals, just went and traded for Joe Flacco this week, right? So, you need to give him time to figure that out. But the head coach needs to be able to keep the locker room together until that happens. The head coach needs to be able to keep the locker room, keep the guys in there playing for one another and with each other despite that. Heaven forbid something were to happen to Jared Goff. I trust that Dan Campbell would be able to keep the Lions as a competitive football team and keep the locker room together for, you know, if it's, some sort of injury that's like a few weeks, because like an ankle sprain or something. I have faith in Dan Campbell to be able to keep that locker room, you know, together during that time. Yes, they might not win all the games, but there's a difference between you've got your backup quarterback, you're not winning every game, and you've got your backup quarterback and your team looks like they're not even playing, which is what we saw from the Ravens this week and is what we've seen from the Bengals in the last couple weeks. Absolutely, how good or bad the backup quarterback play is, you know, plays a major role in it. Cooper Rush was not good this last week. He was downright bad. Jake Browning has been downright bad. But is the head coach able to keep the team together during that, or is the head coach lost the locker room in that because of that? And I think that's why we're seeing some of these, you know, downward spins, because Joe Burrow is hurt, and the Bengals already knew that their defense wasn't very good, and so they had to just score lots of points. And now they're not going to be able to score lots of points, and the whole locker room is like, and this is a wasted season, and Zach Taylor can't get him back together. Like how much of that is like, yes, Joe Burrow was supposed to be healthy the whole year, and that was supposed to have a big impact on how successful they were this year. But still, like there's that culture aspect of it that is really important too, that I think that's a big difference and a big contributing factor.
It really says how they've lost as well. Where the Bengals, they are notoriously slow starters during the Joe Burrow era. They've
Hmm.
started 0-2 a number of times throughout the time Joe Burrow's been there. This year,
Absolutely.
they start 2-0, I think. They at least won week one, and it was ugly. And then they won the Jacksonville game. I don't know if that was week 2 or 3. Anyway, they won 2 out of their first 3 games. Normally, I would think, hey, they won 2 out of their first 3 games. They don't normally do that. Good for them. They were able to kind of rally and be able to win those games. Good for them. And then the Bengals looked so terrible that they immediately, all of the fans, all of the media is like, Zach Taylor needs to be fired. They have looked that bad that it's like, even though you won a couple of games you normally wouldn't, winning against a Jacksonville team that's looked good, and you just look at this Bengals team and you go, no, they lost so terribly. They had no energy, no life, no schemes, no anything that was working. They look so bad that we want to fire this man immediately. They look so
Mm,
terrible. John Harbaugh has a long track record. He's a Super Bowl champion. Lamar Jackson's looked amazing. The offense has looked really good all this year when Lamar Jackson's been in. And he's out for one game against the Texans, and they look so terrible that people are calling for his head. He's had a
yeah.
history of being on the hot seat here and there, but with Lamar Jackson being so dominant and leading them to multiple number one seeds, and the team being so successful in terms of a regular season team, John Harbaugh literally has such a terrible game that people are like, nope, Zach Orr needs to be fired from defensive coordinator. John Harbaugh, like, this is it. You got to be out. They have looked that terrible where 1 or 2 games of just lifeless football, not bad football, zero energy, zero life. Even when they scored, what was it, 24 points, the Bengals did, I think, this last week. The Bengals
Hmm.
scored 24 points because 21 of those were in garbage time, and nobody cared about that. That meant nothing. They had to trade for Joe Flacco because they looked that terrible, and the garbage time 3 touchdowns couldn't save them from looking that terrible to people with eyes, the media, any observer. They looked that bad. They have been that bad. Major changes need to come in both of these teams who have had defensive, just major issues this year, and offensive lines that have looked awful. Both of them
Yeah.
have these support systems for their quarterback, where between both of the teams, Derrick Henry's supposedly a stud. He's struggled this year. And the receivers are incredible for the Bengals. Besides that, nothing, no help, no anything to be able to help these quarterbacks do anything. These teams seem like they are way shallower than we ever thought they could be. That this Ravens team that we thought, oh man, they have all this talent. Look at all these dudes on defense, who a lot of them are injured. I get that. But who we thought last year they rushed for 1 billion yards. Lamar rushed for a ton of yards. Derrick Henry rushed for almost 2,000
Hmm.
yards. They're the they were the number one seed last year. Or was it the year before? The year before, 2 years
Yeah, they
ago.
weren't the number
Yeah.
one last year.
They were still amazing last year. The offense was incredible. And both teams have clearly regressed to a level of the defensive and offensive talent is atrocious, and nothing can fix that right now outside of health for the Ravens. They are that bad. And we need to put a focus on that, shine a light on that. These coaches, these support systems are awful. And anybody who says otherwise is clearly wrong. These quarterbacks are putting in a Herculean effort to lift everything. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, I have ultimate respect for them, seeing what they have to work with now when they're gone.
Yeah, I think I'm a little further back on that praise for Lamar Jackson because even when he was there, the defense was still very suspect and had issues.
Of course, yeah.
Um, and they were still losing games even with him there. Now, again, that wasn't all his fault, right? That Buffalo game, they scored 40 points, so
Mm-hmm.
like
Yep.
it's not all his fault, but still it's like like there's it I I I have questions with other aspects of that team even before Lamar
Mm-hmm.
Jackson got hurt. Now, again, that seemed to be the thing that completely deflated the Ravens team. And people calling for John Harbaugh's job are in some ways ridiculous, and in other ways, I mean, we see this, there are times that there are teams that just need to make a change to get somebody else in there to sort of take it the next step. I think we're seeing a lot of that with Jacksonville right now. I'm not seeing the ways that the Jacksonville Jaguars roster has changed that drastically from last year to this year. It has changed, of course. They drafted Travis Hunter, they drafted a couple of running backs, stuff like that. Shout out Syracuse alum LaQuint Allen has the highest pass blocking grade of any running back, any qualified running back in the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
So good for him. But regardless, like, okay, Liam Cohen seemed to be the what was missing, right? And so I don't think that Baltimore that they need to replace their head coach and get John Harbaugh out of there because he's the thing that's holding them back. But still, I think I do agree though. I mean, we've already seen for years and years and years like how little help Joe Burrow has, and now we're seeing what it looks like when he's gone, and what it looks like for the Ravens when Lamar Jackson is gone, and yeah, I do think it's interesting. Cool. Well, hey, um, last thing, and we're already at an hour, but last thing, we'll just do real quick. Who is the team that is under 500 or 500 or below right now that you think if you had to place money on one of the teams that's 500 or below to make the playoffs at the end of the year, who are you putting your money on?
Mm-hmm. I would put my money on the Kansas City Chiefs. I just think, as I said before, they have multiple avenues to get there. Even though the schedule's tough, as we discussed, as we went in deep with, I just have an institutional belief that between their coordinators, their coaches, their players, their O line, everybody knows what they're doing. And we've seen them at their low water marks. And I think this team has the requisite amount of talent to be able to make it work. And the Chargers have physically fallen apart, and the Broncos are not at that next level. I think that the Chiefs, if they were like in a spot like the Ravens, where the Ravens are 1-4, going to be 1-5. If the Chiefs were 1-4, 1-5 right now with the schedule and everything, I'd say they're left for dead. They're just like on the side of the road, no chance, like nothing's going to do it. But the situation, the level of trust that I have in the institution, I would just put trust in the Chiefs to be able to make it there. And I just think that the AFC is really weird in the middle class, where the Steelers, like they always are weird, 9-10 wins. The Ravens obviously are in a really strange spot. The Colts, the Jaguars, the Chargers, the Broncos, the Patriots now are kind of ascending. But it just feels like that middle class of the AFC is weird, and Kansas City can kind of prey on weird. And so I kind of just have a trust in them that they'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think Kansas City would be the most popular pick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there honestly aren't that many 2 and 3 teams right now. There's a lot of 1 and 4 teams, but there aren't that many 2 and 3 teams. Um, so like in the NFC, there's 2 teams that are 2 and 3, Arizona and Carolina. I don't think anybody in their right mind would put money on either of them to be that team. You've got
Mm-hmm.
Chicago at 2 and 2. it seems like maybe they're coming around, but also I don't know. And they just had, they just had their bye week. Dallas
Mhm,
is 2-1. There's still so many issues with that defense that I feel like it would be hard to rally
mhm,
around them. Um, so I like Kansas City. I also think that it wouldn't be a bad idea to put that money on Houston, because I think there's certainly a world where Indianapolis and Jacksonville kind of come back down to earth a little bit,
mhm,
and Jacksonville is the only one that's played Houston of those two teams, and they've only played once, so.
mhm,
I think there is a world for Houston. I think they had a really awesome get right game this last week against, yes, a decimated and bad Baltimore team, but the the shock of momentum and adrenaline to that team, from a win like that, I
mhm,
think could be a really really good spark for them that could set them on the right direction. CJ Stroud looked really good. Pretty much for like the first time all year.
mhm,
He looked really, really good this last
mhm,
week. Um, so yeah, I think you wouldn't be foolish to put it on
mhm.
Houston either.
Also, just shout out to the Cowboys, specifically their quarterback, Dak Prescott. He's a dude that I've always thought in a similar tier to the Kirk Cousins tier. This year, I think he's playing better than his second and MVP year a couple of years ago. I just think that Dak has looked so sharp as a passer, his mobility, his strength. You see him with his shirt off in the locker room in clips. The dude's jacked. He's come back from his leg injury looking better than ever. I just think this is the best version of Dak Prescott we've seen in year 10, which is saying something because we don't normally see quarterbacks peak this late into their career. But
Hmm.
this to me looks like the best version of Dak I've ever seen. Really impressive stuff out of Dak Prescott.
Yeah, totally agree. Um, yeah, I'm just so concerned about that defense. Like
It's
they w- they
terrible.
beat
It's
they
so bad.
beat the Giants in overtime, and it took them scoring 40 points to do it. Like
Mm-hmm.
they tied with Green Bay in overtime. They had to score 40 to do it. Like, yes, that offense is incredible, right? But like,
Javante Williams, man, resurging. I never thought Javante Williams was going to come back and do this after how he looked the last couple of years. And
hmm
CD's going to come back. I just think Pickens has looked great. Pickens plus CD plus Williams plus the tight end. Like, I just think this offense is going to look amazing all year and look explosive. I think they could get to 9 or 10 wins and get a wild card spot there just because the offense is that good. And they'll play teams like the Giants where, like, without Russell Wilson, like they'll be able to figure out Jackson Dart, I think, potentially there and make it work. But who knows?
yeah, yeah. I want to be able to agree with you, but I don't know. I think the defense might hold them back that much. Like, the least amount of points they've given up this year is 22 to the Jets. Like,
Mhm.
they
But
gave
they
up
dominated
31.
the Jets. That was garbage time. That was garbage time to the Jets.
Still though, like, that's the least number of points that they've given up. They gave
Yeah.
up
That's some garbage.
31 to Chicago. They gave up 24 to Philadelphia. Honestly, the best their defense has looked was week 1 against Philadelphia. Like,
Mhm,
they gave up 37 in regulation to the Giants. They gave up
mhm,
40, to Green Bay.
mhm. I
It's
just
tough.
trust them to be decent. I don't know if they're definitely not going to be great. They're not getting to 11 or
Right.
12 wins. No shot. But I
No.
trust that they can get between 8 and 10 wins, definitely. I have trust in that.
Yeah.
It's the Joe
I just
Burrow 9
think
and 8 a couple last year.
looking at and this will be the last thing we talk about because we're going way over. Looking at the Cowboys' remaining schedule, they play the Panthers. I think that their offense is that much better than the Panthers' defense that it is a bigger gap between those two units than the Panthers' offense to the Cowboys' defense. So, think that should be a win. Then they host the Commanders. Do we think that the Commanders' defense is is good enough that it can um that it can make up for how good or sorry, do we think that the Commanders offense is that much better than the Cowboys defense that it can make up for the ways the Cowboys offense is better than the Commanders defense?
I think it's really close. I think that's a
Okay.
50-50. Both of these defenses suck. I
Okay.
have zero faith in the Commanders defense, but the Commanders offense is so efficient too. I think it's
Right.
a coin flip. I'd say
Okay.
coin flip.
Then the Broncos. I think the Broncos defense is good enough that
Broncos,
it'll stymie the Broncos, they won't win that game.
yeah,
Then they play the Cardinals. Okay? The Cardinals, a lot of weird stuff going on,
yeah.
you know,
I'd
it's
favor the
and
Cowboys there. I'd favor
yeah.
them.
Yeah. I can see the Cardinals winning that because that could be that one game that they always have every year that you're like, how did you score that many points and win that game? Like
Mhm.
that just happens. Okay, the Raiders, they should beat the Raiders.
Yes.
Definitely. Okay. Then they play the Eagles. I don't think so.
Uh,
I
but the
I
Eagles are going to have weird vibes this year, man. The Eagles already are looking like that when they won 11 games or whatever a couple years ago, then fell apart. They're looking like
yeah,
that. So I think you could see weird stuff, but the Eagles should win.
right. Okay. Then the Chiefs.
No, no, the
The
Cowboys should
Chiefs
not be.
the Chiefs on Thanksgiving. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Then they go to Detroit.
Oh no,
Yeah, no.
I don't love that.
Then then they host the Vikings.
I'm okay with that. I think they can beat the Vikings. I don't
Okay.
like the Vikings corners that much. I think you
Fair.
can throw the ball on them. Yeah,
Okay.
and
Then they
JJ
host the
McCarthy sucks.
Yeah, he kind of does. Then they
I'll
host
just
the Chargers.
the Chargers will kind of be falling apart by then. I think
Well,
that's close.
we're in the last 3 weeks of the season, so the Chargers may actually at that point have gotten back healthy a little bit.
Yeah, Chargers favored, but not a big margin to me.
Okay. Then they play
Yeah,
the Commanders in Washington on Christmas Day.
they'll split with the Commanders. I think one of them they'll win, one they'll lose. I think's fair,
Okay. And then they go to New York for the last game of the year.
and they should win that.
Yeah.
That's
So
six
that
more wins
okay,
right
so
now.
that puts
That
them
would
at 8 8
eight
and
and
1.
one, and that's not them winning any games they shouldn't. That's losing to all the good teams.
Right.
I
And
think we
that's
got it
also
right. I
factoring that
think
they
between
win all the
eight,
games they should, which it's the NFL, they play the games for a
right.
reason. So it'll
Right,
be
but I
interesting.
think 8-1, that sounds pretty Cowboys-ish given
Yeah,
their roster. And I think if they had Micah Parsons, they would be like 10 wins or whatever. Pretty feasibly. I think the defense will be better, to be honest. But
true.
anyway,
True.
I think we got
All
it
right.
right. I think mid.
All right. We gotta head out of here. It's been a longer ep because we've had a lot more to talk about. But next week we'll be back to our typical regular season format that we've had this year that's been really good. And yeah, we appreciate all of you. Thanks for bearing with us as we took last week off as Nick was traveling back, or still at that point he was still in Europe traveling back,
Mhm.
later in the week. So anyway, we appreciate all of you. Enjoy the games this week and have a good one.